All right, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our closing keynote. This is, great to be up here. It's going to be a great conversation. We're going to be talking about is the new financial playbook. AI is a systemic game changer. So we know artificial intelligence. We hear about it often. It's gone from this back office experiment, these different areas where it's a shiny object just on the horizon, to being we're hearing it's here now. We have to be looking at it. It's becoming an operating system of finance is really what I'm hearing more and more in industry and people talking about. And it's all about transforming how our customer experience operating in different markets and being more efficient and seeing where the changes can happen. But to me, the real question is if it's truly systemic and it's not just this tool, but is a foundation in how we work, how do financial institutions, their employees, our customers, really prepare for what's next? So that's what we're going to be unpacking. Those are the types of areas we're going to be diving into. So very excited to be here. As you were saying, I'm Chris Jurin. I'm the Vice President of Emerging Technologies at CGI. So I focus on emerging areas, helping bring, unpacking these really complex situations and delivering business value for some of our clients. And as we said, we're joined here with Armando Benitez and Shelby Austin. And actually, why don't you guys do a quick introduction of yourselves?
Please.
Shelby, please.
Hey guys, I'm Shelby. I'm the CEO of Arteria. I'm a serial founder, also used to lead and build the AI practice for Deloitte. And now I work with large-scale banks all over the world, just deploying our AI product at Arteria, and that's what I do.
Hello everybody, Armando Benitez. I work with BMO Capital Markets on defining our strategy and execution as it comes to AI. Interesting space, something that we have been working for a number of years, and now, especially in the last 2 years, where generative AI really came to transform the way we work, that has really changed our perspective, so very excited to be here.
Oh, that's great, thanks. So, in the introduction, I was talking about the AI being described as the operating system of finance. And, maybe Shelby, I'm going to go to you first. Like, what does that mean to you, both personally and professionally, when we talk about that operating system?
Yeah, so I think it represents a fundamental shift in financial services. I think what's so interesting about AI becoming this operating system is that it really demonstrates the change in that people understand now the inevitability of what's coming. And so whereas before you sort of had to fight to convince people that AI was here and convince people that AI was relevant, now there's much more of a pull. And so for me, I guess personally and professionally, what that means is that people are calling me a lot more to figure out what's going on rather than, which is amazing. It's a real pull because once you accept that this will change and you just realize you have to get it right, then that's a completely different conversation than starting and saying, is this going to happen or not? So it's been a fundamental shift, even more so in the past 24 months, and it's a pretty exciting time. Arteria is sort of the agentic backbone of operations for banks, and so it's neat that we were sort of where the puck was going before this sort of agentic moment came up, and so it's like a spark has turned on, and it's a very exciting time to be in this space.
That's great. And you talk about the pull and the spark and the excitement, and to me where I get concerned though is that how do we go and cut through the hype and understand where there is hype, and also where is there day-to-day impact? And maybe, I don't know, Armando, I know you're talking about that.
Yeah.
Do you want to maybe touch on some of that?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, AI is nothing new to a large financial institution, and something we've been working for a number of years. And so if I were to focus on the generative AI piece, we're moving now from just having POCs, proof of concepts, to something that is actually used in production. Examples of that, for instance, is in the surveillance piece, where we now are able to consume all internal communications and identify signals and messages that have to be looked after by a human. We've been in the space of signal generation for a number of years, and to me, that's what makes it real. That is part of a production system helping us make better decisions, and that is the second piece, how we see AI. AI being as a co-pilot, a human augmentation. What we want to bring is people up the value chain so they can do better and higher value jobs as it is part of the transformation that we're going through. And so the question is changing from, is this the best model to solve the particular problem that we have as it comes to generative AI? But more, how can we solve this problem now that we have a real solution at scale in a responsible manner in an enterprise context?
Yeah, I think those are some of the, like you said, AI is not new, but the challenges that we're seeing continue to be new in that. And then like something I often say, like, there's a lot of people who've been doing AI since before AI was even cool. Yes. So this is something we have experience with, but the challenges just continue to change. But maybe if we think about that, so we're talking about these different areas, and this being a fintech a conference, like maybe Armando, do you want to talk about the fundamental shift that we're seeing in the nature of competition between some of the startups that are there and the larger institutions?
Absolutely. And I think can be both in the sense that for fintech companies, AI is an equalizer, access to technology that is going to be leveling the playing field, and to me that's exciting. But then if we look at, on the other hand, from financial institutions, we have been working for quite a number of years, not only on AI, but the frameworks associated with delivering enterprise class solutions. So this is responsible AI, this is regulatory compliance, things that are necessary to ultimately deliver a solution that makes sense and work at the enterprise level. But the currency at the enterprise is trust. And so to me, this is an incredible opportunity for, on one side, fintech companies leverage this new technology to gain trust in the market, and on the other hand, for financial institution, use the good work that we've done to move ahead and keep the competitive edge. And the field is changing, and to me that was clear, especially in the past 2 days, where things like open finance or open banking is coming to play. So that blurry line of what is a financial institution, what is a fintech, may be changing. And so to me, this is an incredible time to be doing this type of work.
Oh, that's very cool. And Shelby, like Armando's talking about the changes that we're seeing. Like, one thing that I always look at is, can AI, can it change and reshape where financial power sits now that we're seeing opening up markets both for big and small and changing what we're doing?
Yeah, so first of all, just to build on what Armando was saying, I think the concept that the fintechs are coming to disintermediate the banks is kind of an old school notion. I think that we all sort of play our part and work together very happily, particularly on the wholesale side. I think on the retail side that, obviously can be a bit more blurry, but certainly for the most part, fintechs are really playing an enabling feature. In terms to your question, Chris, just about the globalization component there, I mean, what is happening in the world is immense and big, and what is happening in China with 10 million new grads getting into AI every year is enormous. Yep. And the level of funding in the US is absolutely hundreds of multiples what it is here. And so we really just have to think about who we want to be and if we want to be relevant. And I just think if we slow down too much here in Canada, we're going to really close the door for our ability to have differentiation. I think, as we discussed a couple of sessions ago, the current government really is jumping on the prosperity agenda, which is fabulous to see. But AI is potentially one of our major competitive differentiators globally as well. And not to say we're ever going to compete with the US and China, because I think that ship has long since sailed. But I do think we have specialized gifts and a history because of Hinton and Bengio and like all of the godfathers here, and when the fact that AI effectively grew up here. And so I would just say we as Canadians just really need to keep our eye focused on how we grow the pie as quickly and as aggressively as possible. And I hear things like in Canada, we might want to be the risk center of the AI world. Like, that's not a thing. There's no such place for Canada in that spectrum. And so we really have to focus on how much of the commercial pie can we get. Because if, for example, our regulation is quite different than Europe or the US, like we become irrelevant immediately. And so we just really need to be very aware that globalization is a huge part of the AI story and stay focused on where we can maximize value for Canadians in that respect.
Okay, so maybe just a question to either of you. Like, do you think there's certain markets that are a better opportunity in Canada that we could be focused on, or even that AI could open up across geographies that you guys see? Is there anywhere you guys are seeing or thinking about?
I think Shelly already touched on that point, comparing Canada and the US. But if I were to then extrapolate to other places, AI is hungry for data. So countries where digital was leapfrogged, and I'm thinking emerging markets, China, Brazil, and other places where people are already fully mobile as it comes to banking, as it comes to just general e-commerce. I would say those are great opportunities, because an important piece of AI, again, is data, whether it's on the traditional machine learning or even on the generative AI space, where you might not be training models, but you still have to provide the right context.
Yeah, I would just say Canada is also a great market. I mean, buy Canadian, keep buying Canadian, keep trying to sort of solidify that demand side of the equation in order to ensure that what we have here stays here is going to be super critical. I think we're seeing the appetite right now more than ever to really work across our own borders and to really harness our own power. But I, for one, am quite hopeful for this moment in time that we'll finally see homegrown success here.
That's awesome. And Armando, you were just mentioning about, when we have traditional machine learning models, all about, training them and doing that. But then when it comes to generative AI, we're seeing so much around context engineering. And I think if people aren't familiar with, providing context and what that means, that's something to look into and really get some thoughts around that, because that's where I see a lot of change coming.
Yes.
And we keep seeing that continue to go on. But, we're talking about these new playbooks, and with that comes many opportunity and some risk as well. So I'd love to kind of dive in and see both sides of that and see what your guys' thoughts are. So Shelby, let's start with you on the most immediate opportunities being, we talked a little on some of those new markets, but also customer segments or areas in operations that maybe we can see some new opportunities that haven't been there in the past that now we're seeing open up.
Yeah, so I think we used to think of AI as a back office solution, primarily because machine learning was so successful in our risk groups to really help us throughout our journeys. Now I think if you're not looking at every single problem you have and saying whether it's a revenue problem, a cost problem, or a risk problem, how can I use AI as a fundamental tool in my toolbox to solve this problem, I don't think we're getting it right. In my job, even in my company, we started 4.5 years ago, a few years ago, we would have said we could transform, 30% of a process, really accelerate something. We are seeing an unprecedented change in what we think can be done with this technology, where now we will see the whole scale of re-engineering of process and the complete remake, from a human perspective, what that process means. Am I saying humans will go away? No. Am I saying that a lot of human intervention will go away? Yes, I am. And so I think that what we're seeing is the absolute and complete difference than we've ever seen before. And I think, Armando, I don't know about you, but like in the past 12 months, we've seen a complete switch in the way people are thinking about just how far they can go with this technology. And so it's really quite interesting. Will we always get it right? No. You need a risk for appetites. MIT published a study saying 95% of Gen AI projects are failing, and we're seeing that. And it's, but often it's not due to the technology. It's often due to how we're thinking about the process re-engineering, what we're putting around it at the table, where we're going. And so if we can get this right, the ability for this technology to transform is unprecedented.
Yeah, and you mentioned the number of failures. To me, like, innovation doesn't always succeed, right? Like, we want it to. I don't want to fail. I don't want to miss on things. But if every time you do innovation, you're always succeeding, you're not innovating, you're executing. That's something I think about often, and some things should fail. Like there are things we're doing and it wasn't a good idea, but it's how do you respond to that? Do you pivot or persevere and move forward in that space?
Well, the way we would have approached a project that we would deliver, like we deploy like real AI everywhere, and the way we would approach a project today is totally different than the way we would have approached it 24 months ago. It's crazy to think that we, a brand new company, are disrupting ourselves every day. I mean, if you think about how fast that goes, I mean, where do it's a wild time.
Yeah.
That is an incredible point. The space is changing so rapidly, and sometimes I like to extrapolate. If I were to look the state of generative AI, natural language processing 2 years ago, it's completely different what we have today. Now, if I were to extrapolate that 2 years down the road, or even 5, is somewhat scary of some of the thoughts that we could have. And it is the sort of technology that we were dreaming to have 2 years back, but now it's here, and so the opportunity is real.
100%. So, Shelby, you were talking about how it's not just about one area of the back office, it's many different areas. It's all across the bank, across the different part of the organization. So Armando, that to me, is there a risk of becoming overly reliant on AI for decision making?
Absolutely, and not only within the context of finance, but really if we look more broadly as a society, people in this audience has an advantage. We have gone to school without having AI writing our essays or helping us discover new topics. And I think about my kids and how they're using AI. And I spend time with them, showing them, don't solve the homework for me, but teach me a new concept, or even how you do the prompting. And so this is part of what I'm concerned. And to the point of a reliance, if you think about what AI is good at, is at pattern recognition. So you ingest a lot of data, recognize patterns, and go from there. But where humans are very good are in the gray zone, right? Where there is ambiguity, where there is not a clear answer. So if we think about that aspect, the systems will be trained without having exposure or enough understanding of those complex situations. So then when we go and generalize, there will be failures. And of course, as new projects start being delivered, they work. And so we have to make sure that as they're deployed in a real environment, they're properly monitored, that there is checks and balances, that there are controls, that there are overwrites and kill switches that would allow control back if needed be. The other risk that is very clear is the challenge that if we are all using the same model, and not only the same model, you could have many different places to run that, but same infrastructure, same providers, that could be a challenge, as we will all be doing the same mistakes, the same wins. That can be solved again by having the right frameworks in place, trustworthy AI as being one of them. And then with that in mind, the other piece where AI can bring interesting challenges is around transparency and accountability. Who is responsible for the decisions that AI makes? And all those are part of conversations that we're having. Some we're in a better spot than others, but it's early in the game, I would say.
Yeah, and just around the decision-making side of that, though, like I constantly am worried about that, because you mentioned that we went to school, we still have to do these different things, and there's a whole section of the population who may not have that. Like right now, if you ask me, what's my wife's phone number, I do know that because I have to have an emergency contact just in case I fall off the stage or something, but I don't know my brother's. I couldn't tell you, I have no idea what it is. It's changed since it was memorized, and I couldn't tell you that. But that's okay. Like I don't care if I don't know certain things. I can look it up on my phone, I can Google it. But what's going to happen in the future if we're so reliant on this? We hear about people with ChatGPT that they can't make a decision without asking for it. What's going to happen to some people who have come up through that? And it's just something that I think of often. Where are we going to go, and how do we continue to have an edge, and where does that look like? Yeah. So something maybe that we can shift a little bit. So we're talking within the organization. We're talking about different spots that we're focused in on. And one area that always needs to be there is the customer. Customer first. We're there. That's really what all of us are here is to serve our customers. And maybe I'll start with you, Shelby. Like, when we look at AI reshaping that customer experience, we've heard about it in some of the panels, but I'd love to hear your thought, because just where you're at in the innovation you're pushing on personalization, speed, service, all of that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how it's reshaping.
Yeah, I think that what's changing is the customer expectation, just in terms of really receiving that personalization experience. And so that's really pushing us further and further on that journey. What I will say, though, is that as much as the bar is increasing in terms of personalization, customers are looking for that transparency that Armando suggested, like, what are you doing with the information? What kind of processes are you doing? In particular, I think with health and wealth decisions, as we like to call them, like, do I have a medical problem, or can I get this credit? I think that trust and transparency becomes a particular, of particular interest there. But I think what's interesting is that if you think about how quick OpenAI was adopted by customers, even though it was flawed all over the world, I think we're also seeing that the customer wants to come along on the journey with us, where they want to try, do okay, iterate, do better, and keep trying with us. And that's different than we've seen in the past, where we used to go like, ta-da, it's done. And so I think we're really seeing a change in the customers being okay with as long they would rather see you change faster than have you get it perfect. And so it was really quite hard, right? Like, many of the other hyperscalers made a different choice and said OpenAI will most certainly fail because this chatbot's going crazy. But that actually wasn't the case. And so, it's a really interesting customer learning that we can take from there, where customers definitely want this personalization, definitely want us to go on the journey, but also do seem to have some tolerance to come along the journey with us. And so that's just, it's a little bit different than the perception would have been just a few years ago.
No, that's interesting. I know I expect it to work, but it's just like you said, it's almost like it's okay. I accept a little bit more failure from this, and it's interesting. I don't know why I'm okay with that versus another system. The website takes 3 seconds to load, and I'm screaming on my computer.
Yeah, 100%.
Versus a totally wrong answer. Like, it's just such a different perspective that we have within that. But you were just talking there, Shelby, about having that trust and transparency, and that's crucial for any client. But Armando, do you think customers will see this as empowering, or kind of the flip side of being more intrusive into their lives?
I think it depends how the AI is delivered. And as most things in life, I think there is a balance. If what AI is providing is adding value, simplifying your life, then yeah, by all means. And to the point that they were making, Chris and Shelby, there is an expectation that some of the commercial tech becomes available also in the enterprise. And so with that, very demanding. But as I said, it's a balance, right? If it becomes intrusive, if I don't have controls, if I don't have that sense of trust, then I will not want to be profiled. I want it, again, to be something that is useful to me. And that control or that trust is being built by providing users the ability to decide how much AI they want to control, and by actually measuring the impact. And sometimes this could be perceived metrics, NPS score, or many others that ultimately allows us to get a sense of how AI is being deployed internally, so our employees, but also our customers. And from the perspective of the user, we have to understand that everybody would have different expectations. We're dealing with different generations. Some who are more digital native would have different expectations that some that are more high touch and expect to have that personal part of interaction. And particularly in our business, it is effectively a people's person. We do spend a lot of time having conversations with clients and ensuring that we fully understand them. So, at no time that's going to be replaced by an AI. So it is, again, a balance.
Yeah, to me, that balance is balancing the awe-inspiring power that AI can give. That was such a great suggestion to creepy, how do you know this about me, right? We get those ads on our phone that we're like, I'm wondering, are they listening in? And that's not always the case. It's just based on your history. Of course. because that's even the old machine learning, the clustering that exists, right? This isn't new, but the ability, the amount of data that we can get, it's hard to balance those two things. And I know that that's something we're always looking at, of how we can keep that balance, keep it feeling like that, driving business value, but not, intrusive or getting away from our clients. So you touched on the people, the customers, and needing, the employees that you have, and needing to touch on that and to bring them along and bring them on a journey. You mentioned upskilling because we're worried about that, right? Like Shelby, you said, like AI is not going to take everyone's job, but there are changes that we're already seeing in our jobs today. And maybe just, you did such a great job talking about talent earlier. Maybe I'll come back to you on like any surprising career paths that you're seeing than someone who wants to be embedded or emerge into AI across finance. Like, is there anything like you're seeing as like some really cool new things that are out there that people may not be thinking of?
Yeah, so for me, and again, we were talking about this a little bit on the talent panel earlier, like you definitely need process engineers now to figure out what the value of the AI will be within a given process. And people don't always think about that, but it's true. You absolutely need probably more engineers than you think you do in order to be able to put the science into production. And so while science continues to be critically important, I mean, the ratio I use, Armando can tell me, he keeps a different ratio, is like 10 engineers per scientist, men. And so like really, maybe more, honestly. And even more so now, because the engineering is getting quite a bit better with AI. Shout out to Cursor and Windsurf, I'm a big fan. But as the coding gets faster and better, we really need people who fundamentally understand applied AI. And I think that this, as a person who's chosen to make the better part of the last 15 years of my career in science without being a scientist, I started off that journey in such a weird imposter way. And over the past decade or so, I've really grown into my non-scientific roots in that I've been, working with science teams for so much of my career. And yet the fact that I'm like an application specialist is really just something where I think we're going to need more and more people to figure out what can be transformed, how it can be transformed, how to drive that transformation through an organization. And I think more and more those skills are going to be, this year's scientist, if I can say that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true.
That ratio you mentioned is about right. And even one of the things that I tell people that start in data science is that eventually they will have to become engineers, because if we think about the work that they do, cannot be in isolation, and it cannot be in the expectation that somebody magically transforms it into a real application. So that interface has to be as close as possible as they all becoming engineers.
Okay, so if people need to become engineers, we're talking about new skills, like what do you think the bigger talent gaps are going to be that we're going to see in the next 1, 2, 3, whatever years in the future?
Especially with the size of investments that are going to AI, not only in the tools that we're building internally, but what we're getting from vendors. I want to make sure that everybody, and that's part of our strategy as we deploy AI, becomes experts on using AI in their particular business unit. So really, it will transform everybody. But if I were to look something more into the future, I think one of the roles that will take more importance, and it will change slightly as it is defined today, is translators of AI requirements, business requirements, and bridging that gap. And in the same way we were saying earlier, where everybody has to become an engineer, everybody has to have a domain knowledge of what they're solving. But then that gap needs to be corrected by somebody that is understanding of both sides. We mentioned trust several times today, and I have heard that throughout the past 2 days. So really people that understand the implications of building proper frameworks for responsible AI, and something that is not an afterthought, but something that, at least for us, we consider before we write any line of code. The next, I would say, given that one important piece is, and ChatGPT, great example of what a great interface is, simple, get the job done, behind a great product but great interface. So people who are creating those human AI interfaces is going to become more and more critical to have products that are successful. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, all roles are going to change, and so it is part of our duty to become better at AI.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add to that, which I feel confident Armando would agree with, is just we also need our executives to be able to understand. I mean,
yes, absolutely. Yes.
I'm sure Armando's upskilling the executives across the bank as well. Is like, really and truly, I feel like people are always asking me like about the most recent Wall Street Journal on whatever. This week, what was it? People are falling in love with their chatbots. Okay, well, it's been a good topic of conversation this week. Interesting, other than the visa issue, that's been my whole week. But I think what is important is that executives understand what level to approach this at. Do they need to know the difference between, Claude and GPT-5? No, probably not. Do they need to understand context windows? Probably. There probably is a way of saying, can I make a good decision for my business about this technology without necessarily being so deep in it? And so trying to figure out what that right level is, and trying to ensure that we don't make our non-scientist executives feel insecure about their, lack of understanding of the models, which are really not the point. It's really, that's why they have Armando to do that. He can guide them through that decision, much like you would with any technology. It's now a matter of like, what do I think can change and what are the problems that I need to attack next? And how do I look at impact versus opportunity, et cetera, and guide through those decisions, much like you would have any transformative capability in the past.
Yeah, to me, you were talking about how do you approach executives or really anyone. Like, to me, it's about meeting people where they're at, right? It's not expecting someone to be at a higher level. It's about meeting them where they're at and showing them the value. Like, very often people hear about AI, it sounds scary, and then you start using, okay, I get it. But that's everything, right? If I say I don't know how a car engine works, well, if someone explains some of the fundamentals, okay, I can kind of get that and then understand enough to be able to make some, you hear something, you hear about a V8 versus whatever, then you start to understand more. Like, that to me is giving people the language, giving people the understanding, and meeting them to help them move forward is so important.
But when I hear in financial services, like people, particularly in the wealth business, will say, well, I'm in a high-touch business. Or in investment banking, they'll say, I am in a human-only business. And those norms are changing. And so, we need executives to kind of get on the train that's changing, because it is changing. And regardless, as I said, our American peers and our Asian peers are definitely well through the beginning of that change already, and so we kind of have to jump on the train as well, or be left behind there.
100%. So let's look to the future, and Shelby, I'm going to start to you. Like, how should firms be looking at balancing collaborations with regulators, with fintechs, with the tech providers? Armando, you were talking about the different providers that are out there. But you still want to be competitive and have to be aggressive towards that. How do you balance between how you collaborate and how you differentiate?
Yeah, so I think right now what is such an interesting moment about this time is that the transformation is competitive. Meaning those who transform faster and see the benefits at both the top and bottom line in this minute will actually have a competitive advantage because of the smoothness of that transformation, which sort of sets a different, unique spin on that question, because how do you kind of navigate through it? Yep. The truth is this: most people aren't doing a very good job. There's so much ground to cover. It's an enormous problem if you think about every single aspect of your institution that could change with the use of AI. As a result, no two people are looking at the same thing. And so I think there has to be a high degree of collaboration. And then you really have to be very clear on who you are and where your alpha is, and really focus on that and hold that very tight and very dearly. But the rest of it, I think you're largely better off, obviously fiercely competing, but really getting what you can from the ecosystem and from each other to help on that journey. And then just being ever more crystal clear about where your differentiation is coming from. I think the question that is maybe even more interesting is, like, once everyone's done their transformation, where's the competitive differentiation then? And that's, kind of a crazy question, because if everyone's using AI for every aspect or the same model or every aspect of everything in the same way, that will be a different story. But I think we're probably 5 to 10 years away from that before that would even be a possibility. So I think for the next several years, closely understand where you're going to win and then collaborate on everything else to sort of get through the volume fast enough, knowing that that will outstrip, like, the time of getting all of that done will benefit you way more than being very, very private. Obviously, that's not a view held by everyone, but I think it's kind of the prevailing global view that we're seeing emerge.
Yeah. You were asking, like, once you've transformed, once everyone's transformed, how do you differentiate, how do you win? To me, it's going to be the people who can take the insights and turn them into action and produce with that at scale, which is really tough. Like, we talk about slow and hard and monolithic and all these different things. It's a hard thing to do, but I see that that's going to be the firms we're going to see that are just going to knock it out of the park and do so much in the future.
Yeah, and just to give it an example on the other opposite end of the spectrum, like, we just announced a global partnership with SIFMA on U.S. Treasury clearing, and so we'll be their tech partner for the full reg remediation. But, like, that's something, like, everyone has to do it. Is there really competitive differentiation and regulatory clearance? I don't know. I mean, I guess you could make an argument there is. I don't see it, though. And so that's something you want to collaborate heavily on, get through it, get over the hump, and keep going. So that way you can focus on your true alpha out there.
Yeah. So, Armando, like, we keep talking about firms treating AI as being systemic, not experimental. What would you say the first priority for an organization should be if you want to be able to do that?
I would say have the proper operational model for AI, and that really encompasses many different fronts: data, infrastructure, security, talent, all under the same vision. And given the complexity of the systems that we're building as solutions that are going to get us to the next phase of our businesses, that requires, especially in large organizations, some good coordination that eventually will lead to frameworks for trustworthy AI. Again, something that is already in some institutions well established, others are getting started, regulators are coming and they want to be part of the conversation, and to me that is very interesting. Also, there's the aspect of data. Where do you store your data? How do you ensure that you have the proper governance in place, data quality control? As we mentioned earlier, AI is hungry for data, but data of good quality. And so, it is complex, but again, having a good ground solution that is shared as a vision for the whole enterprise will make sense to me.
100%. All right, so we're getting late into this. Maybe a final question to both of you. So let's look 3 to 5 years out, 2 to 3 years out. I don't know. I'm always afraid to say, I don't even know if I want to do 5 months out sometimes. But do you believe AI will be seen more as a disruptor of finance or a stabilizer?
I can give
Armando?
it a shot. Yeah. I think in the short term is going to be a disruptor, and we've seen that today with the speed at which change is coming towards us. But in the long run, is going to stabilize, because what I mentioned earlier about defining frameworks for trustworthy or just general operations is going to become standard, and then we're all going to be having at least a contract to understand how we interact with each other. So I would say it again, short-term disruptor, long-term stabilizer.
I'll double down on that. You guys just heard my point of view on the transformation capability being a huge competitive advantage in disruption right now. That said, I'd like to leave the door open for the fact that we will always need disruption to keep challenging the model. When I was just at a conference in Greece not too long ago and heard some of the Asian banks speaking about how many customer onboardings they're doing at kiosks rather than branches. And I just thought it was fascinating. I mean, obviously different markets and everyone's on a phone and like it's, for a variety of reasons, there are differences. But just to think about the entire paradigm of onboarding, 20 million people via a single $10,000 costing kiosk in a year is staggering. And so I just think that there will always be the disruptors that come along and always the challengers to sort of push us all to be better in every part of the ecosystem that we exist in.
No, that's great. And yeah, I have like so many more questions for you guys. I think we're getting later and later, but like we covered a ton of ground, right? We talked about the new operating system. We talked about playbooks and where we see things going, how we're seeing disruption coming. But to me, one thread I was hearing on the panel is we can't wait, right? We can't wait to be comfortable. We have to be taking action. The winners in 2, 3, 5 years from now, those are going to be people who are not on the sidelines, but they're acting while the playbook's being written. And Armando, you were mentioning that, like it keeps changing, right? Shelby, you were saying like it's what we were doing X months ago is not, we're disrupting our own company and we're a young company. So it's okay to be uncomfortable with that, but you need to be acting on that. So when you go back, to me, the first step is, okay, am I going to talk to leadership? Am I going to talk about how are we embedding AI in our strategy if that's not something we're talking about? Maybe it's going to be more about where you're investing your team. You talked about talent. You're hearing all these things. Are you ready? If you're not ready, are we investing in our people? Or maybe acting on that use case that we all wanted? I think, was it Michael from Cohere was saying, don't let perfection be the enemy of progress or stop progress. Like that resonated with me of where we need to be looking. So yeah, the new era, it's not waiting for people for clarity, the perfect playbook. It comes from leading, it comes from doing all this responsibly. And I'm excited for this. So again, I want to thank Armando and Shelby. This was an awesome conversation. I wish we had 30 more minutes to go into more questions. And thank you to everyone here for listening to us, being here, and being at the last keynote, the last panel. I've seen you guys here, so thank you so much.
Thank you.